So we are in our Trapeza now, Matushka and we wish that the rest of our congregation could be with us as well. We have just celebrated the Divine Liturgy on Bright Friday of Friday week, and we want to discuss a little bit further some of the points that were presented in our homily today from John chapter 2, where Christ goes and cleanses the temple. Remember, the temple is the place where God dwells, and that's why Christ objected to it having become a place for profit, for money changers and selling of animals and livestock. And that is the reason that he went in and with a scourge and cleansed the temple, that it could become once more the dwelling place of God. The reason the temple was an appropriate place for God to dwell was because it was exactly the way he himself wanted it to be. The design of the temple was not that of a famous architect, but it was that of the most famous architect himself, God himself. It was God himself who prescribed exactly how the tabernacle was to be, and later how the temple, a more permanent structure based on the tabernacle, was to be as well. A place of great beauty and a place of great simplicity. Not a place of ostentatious design, but a place where God could dwell and his holiness could be expressed. And we saw from the chapter that the purpose of the temple was a picture that God himself would live in us. And Jesus in the passage today makes clear this truth when he says, "Destroy this temple and I will build it again in 3 days." Obviously not talking about that temple, the physical temple of Jerusalem that took 46 years to build, but rather the temple of his body, which nobody can raise again, somebody that it's dead, no matter how many years you're given. But God will do that miracle, and God will do that miracle of raising us up. So Christ comes with zeal, and the disciples remembered that the zeal of the Lord would consume him as he took these scourges and whipped the livestock out from the temple as he overturned the tables of the money changers. Yet we need to remember that love always guides even the zeal of God. He did it because God so loved the world that he came here precisely that he might dwell in us once again. And we mentioned a little bit about some of the scourges that God uses in our lives, maybe some adversities which will get our attention and take our lives away from dangerous things in order to pray to God and to focus on him again. Remember that it's the loving hand of God that holds the scourge whip, and that all things he does in our lives is an expression, no matter what they are, of his great love for us. Also, we can say that God uses our relationships with one another, the church himself with one another, as scourges in our lives to make us more humble, more beautiful and simple people, places where God wishes to dwell. And so when we think of the interactions that brethren have in monasteries or sisters have in convents, or the husband and wife, and remember, marriage has been appointed for the salvation of his people. These interactions, which can sometimes be interactions of conflict and of challenge and of adversity, are all designed to actually encourage each of us to be more humble than the other. And so when we speak to one another in our relationships with one another, we are to prayerfully speak with one another. We are to speak with one another out of love and out of kindness. And if we hear something that offends us, we thank God for that, because that is a sign of our pride. And God cannot live in a proud heart. Our temple of our spirit is not prepared to receive God. And so our relationships with one another become a scourge of God to cleanse us, to humble us, that we could be a beautiful and simple dwelling place of God himself. And then we have the sacraments that God has given to us, the sacraments of confession, where we come to the priest as the representative of Christ, and we confess our sins, and we, through confession, make our temple pure once again. And the best confessions, Father Zacharias of the monastery in Essex says, are the ones that humble us the most. And so as we humble ourselves and confess our sins, our temple becomes pure for God to dwell in us. And then we can become prepared to receive the body and blood given to us in the sacraments and the gifts of the church that we celebrate at the divine mysteries and prayer. All of these scourges of God are his great blessings to us, that he might dwell in us. St. Isaac says, "For I make bold to say with the Apostle Paul that we are the temple of God. Let us then purify his temple as he is pure, that he may wish to settle in it." Amen.